Hello, I'm Sarah Barth, Executive Director of Sempervirens Fund. Thank you for joining us in our Under the Redwoods webinar series, in which we explore all things related to redwoods, their history, ecology, management issues, and how they inspire us, both historically and through art and culture. I want to thank Sharf Investments, who've been the proud sponsors of this webinar series now for several years, including this year. We are so grateful to them for their ongoing support for this series. We are joined today by Jane Kim. She is a well-known illustrator and artist who focuses on natural subject matter. For the last year or so, she's been Sempervirens' inaugural Forest Fellow. And in that fellowship, she's taken the opportunity to learn more about redwoods and some of the underlying components of redwood forests, different aspects of redwood forests, and translated that into some new art that she'll be sharing with us and describing her experiences. That process throughout her fellowship, we've made films with her, had interviews. You can learn more about it and what she learned. I'm sure Matt will be providing that in the chat. And I think Jane follows in a long line of artists and creatives who have been really at the beating heart of the conservation movement from the very beginning. I know for our organization, going back 125 years, that we've had artists in our midst, including one of our founders, organizational founders, A.P. Hill, who was a photographer, who used his art to help tell people the story of what was happening to redwoods and helped inspire them to take action. And artists have been doing that same thing, explaining natural wonders, inspiring people with natural wonders through writing, through music, through illustrations and drawings, all kinds of ways from day one in our work. And I think that's probably true throughout the conservation arena. So they are true, the artistic community has been a true champion of redwoods. And so Jane comes in a long legacy of artists who've lent their voice to the conservation effort. For us, she has not only been our Forest Fellow, but she has done a lot of work for Sempervirens. If you check out our Climate and Redwood series, all of those beautiful illustrations were done by Jane and her team at Inkwell Studios. And they've done a number of other projects for us. So you can see her amazing artwork interspersed throughout our website and in other publications and materials that we put out. So with that, I want to welcome Jane to the podium, so to speak, and hear from her about her experience working in the redwoods. Thanks, Jane. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. And hello to everybody who has tuned in. I am so thrilled to be here today. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen here before I start. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the intro, and I want to say congratulations to all of you for the opening of the Chitoni Coast Dairies. It is really a feat, especially as we all know right now how quickly things can be dismantled, and building is so much harder, and y'all did it, and this was a long time coming. So so proud to be a small part of that through having provided illustrations for the interpretive signage that will be scattered throughout the trails. So I hope you all get a chance to see that. So a little bit about Inkwell before I dive into the Forest Fellowship and the artworks that came out of that. We are located in Half Moon Bay. I have been in California since 2003, and redwoods have been actually was one of the big reasons why I even wanted to move to California. And in fact, some of you may already know this. I'm sure I've mentioned this in a previous webinar of mine, but my husband and I, Thayer Walker, who is also shown here in this picture and is my business partner at Inkwell Studio, we were married under the redwoods. It's a really funny, as I have a funny moment where we were looking at various venues, and he was doing his due diligence and showing me all kinds of different natural settings outside, of course, because that was something that we wanted to definitely be married outside. And he took me to many coastal bluffs, and I remember pulling him aside and looking at him and thinking, are you understanding what I'm telling you about wanting to be married under the redwood trees? And so we finally got the venue, and we're very happily married at the Walala Redwood RV Park in California, in Northern California. So anyway, redwoods are a dear source of inspiration and absolute magical tree that has inspired me in this last year, especially because of this Forest Fellowship. So I want to put a huge thank you out to Sempervirens Fund for even having the idea to create a fellowship of this nature, and for inviting me to be your first Forest Fellow. I really want to thank Matt here, who is pictured here in this photo, believe it or not. He is that gloved hand and that hat poking out that I have circled. And I just really love this photograph. This is of us pulling in the big round to our studio space that we grabbed from Camp Jones Gulch, which I'll share with you in just a moment. But I just think this picture is perfect because it really captures Matt's spirit. And that is to be behind the scenes, but really holding all the weight. I mean, he really was carrying the entire redwood by himself on this dolly, with the two of us sort of like, but he has been instrumental not only in the Forest Fellowship, but also in connecting the dots to create the Redwoods and Climate series of illustrations. And without him, I don't run this Forest Fellowship. Sincere thank you to Matt today too. Okay, sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical issue here. There we go. So as Sarah mentioned, Redwoods and Climate, which was a four-part sort of written series that came out in 2022, was really how Sempervirens got connected in the first place to do these scientific illustrations. And in part two, we speak about dendrochronology and creating put forward an idea. Well, what if we collect some rounds and actually print the redwood tree rings, so that we have a true visual representation of redwood rings. And so that's actually what sort of sparked conversation into how we can continue to tell stories in this way. I think that visual representation of time and how we can piece together climate from our past and learn how we can make better decisions for our future is really fascinating to me. And what if there's more to learn about redwood trees through this process? And so that's really what sparked this entire fellowship, was that premise. So these are the logs that were Gateway to Big Basin, where we collected those initial first 3 rounds. And here is one of them being cut from a downed tree. And that was the base that created this series called Sempervirens and Elementis. And I wanted to share the pictures of the downed logs because that's going to roll in a teaching moment, a learning moment for me later, as I had an opportunity with scientists about understanding dendrochronology and redwood ecology. But the series that I created first was Sempervirens and Elementis, and it was tied to the way that redwoods don't sort of isolate the four elements in the same way that humans do. You know, I think that human beings really like to compartmentalize and organize and um, sort of keep things in neat sort of columns. But you know, I think what's wonderful about nature is that it's all a relationship, and it all there's a give and a take, there's consequences, there's domino effects, there's um, adaptation, there's they make change, they make the environment. That's very much what redwoods do. And so placed at the center of each of these pieces is a unique print of the redwood tree, paired with elements that support how they have a relationship with that particular element. And so every single thing that was included in these works is a result of my communication and relationships with the scientists that I was connected to as a result of the Forest Fellowship. So in this piece, you know, the learning about the way that redwoods burn and how they can burn from the center out and still survive was something that I found so fascinating, and really wanted to capture that glowing heat that came from the middle. And given these rounds being collected from Big Basin and the fire, you know, which actually, gosh, how long ago was that? 5 years ago today is when the forest raged in flames and then bounced back, which is something that again was a new discovery to see a forest fire of that caliber, and the recovery that I think like 98% of the trees made what was a story to tell. And so here we have animals that are considered cavity nesters after burns, as well as some of the ways that redwoods are regenerative after fire. And so after speaking with several scientists and reading papers about the ways that all of these redwoods sort of sprout new growth just from wherever, was one of the coolest things to see at Big Basin. I did a field trip with Tim Hyland, who works there at Big Basin, and it was just absolutely extraordinary to see these absolute charred sticks of trunks just sprouting new growth. So I wanted to capture that here in this piece. And then this corner here, it represents something unexpected that happened after the forest burned, was all the ceanothus that came up in place now that the canopy, the overstory had been cleared away. It was a plant that no one was expecting to populate the forest floor. And man, the bushes of the ceanothus were way above my head. California quail were running around in Big Basin, like things that we wouldn't have ever seen. So it was quite special to be on that part of that field trip. And of course, then that story moves into Earth. And in this series, I was really hoping to communicate how it's not isolated, and all of these elements are connected to one another. So in the corner here, you see that ghosted imprint of ceanothus, suggesting that that plant had been lying dormant on the ground for millennia. And before it was a redwood forest, there would have been ceanothus all over that landscape. And that led me to think about the deep root systems and the relationship that redwoods have to mycelium and mushrooms, and how they store in these little they're called rhizonodes, and they store like information and DNA of these mushrooms inside of their roots that they tap into when they need to. If they're for example, if they've been burned like they did in Big Basin, it's a way for them to regenerate and tap into necessary information and nutrients to help them regrow. And then above that is a beautiful sort of a depiction of the feathery parts of the leaves. One thing that I learned in this forest fellowship are the ways that even the redwood leaves adapt depending on the needs of the tree. And so these waxy, feathery needles sort of hold the moisture and collect the moisture and allow that moisture to sort of drip back down into the forest floor, making a moist environment for itself. And almost every time I went out into the field with Sempervirens Fund, there was a banana slug, obviously, in we just sort of like saw it as a good sign and a good omen when a banana slug was present, and it always was. So that felt really good. And these are just some of the mushrooms growing around the various sites that are so necessary, and this symbiotic relationship that this page represents is such a beautiful part of redwood adaptation that I think humans could take a lesson from, and the ways that we lean on one another. So that leads us into air and the different needles that are more at the canopy of the redwood tree, and how those needles are adapted to do something a little bit different. They can actually pull moisture directly out of the air from that beautiful fog that our Pacific Ocean and the upwelling that we have here creates for the redwood trees, and they get up to 40% of their moisture content. And I'm likely not sharing anything new in terms of data here that you might have already heard, but it's so extraordinary to think of the desire of the redwood tree. And the desire of the redwood tree is to survive and to thrive. And it has done that for so many more centuries and thousands of millennia of years than humans have. And so these adaptations are something that I really wanted to highlight in this series, and the way that supports, again, not just the redwood, but so many other individuals, including the salamanders and the newts and the amphibians and those creatures that breathe basically through their skin and require a lot of moisture. And so here we have that side by side. And so those lower feathery leaves are peripheral leaves, and the sort of tighter leaves that collect from moisture from the air are axial leaves. And then that moves us into its relationship with water. And of course, Sempervirens is instrumental in the removal of a dam in the San Vicente and Mills Creek watersheds. And it was just such a treat to see. Yep. Sorry, I'm just going to mute that there. To show that the watershed is healthy, and how Sempervirens and their team are restoring this habitat to support coho salmon. And so this is the story that I wanted to share here. So this is all work that I did before really diving into what we are calling the Forest Fellowship. And what I learned in order to create the works for the Forest Fellowship, I think was a deeper lesson than I was even expecting. I was prepared to be enchanted by the redwood forest and to learn a lot about how extraordinary these trees are, and the way that they're able to bounce back from a lot of disasters that we would not think that a tree could normally survive. But I don't think I was really prepared. Oh, and here is the works exhibited in my solo show this last February, called Human Nature: Desire. And so that desire, I was thinking about that word a lot, and you heard me use it earlier to describe the desire to survive. And I think for me, the Forest Fellowship was really about understanding that word. And I think that when I first started this particular exhibit, there was a part of me that sort of thought of desire as a human desire as a negative, as something that caused a lot of issues that we see today that we're trying to combat today in terms of climate and our role in man-made climate change and what we have done to this planet and taken advantage of in a lot of ways in this planet. But I started to realize as a result of the Forest Fellowship that desire is just kind of everywhere. It's the thing that propels us forward. The desire to eat. We need, I think needs and desire are sort of synonymous in some ways. And it's about how we make decisions and how we move forward with those needs. That was the more interesting thing that I wanted to focus on. And I think doing this Sempervirens and Elementis piece really helped shape that for me, because when I thought about what the needs of a redwood tree are, it was so about communication with other species, give and take with other species, providing a landscape that would allow a lot of, I think that the cooperation almost of many different plants and animals that needed to take place. And these were all sort of lessons that I felt humans could really to learn from. And for me as an artist, and especially as a scientific illustrator, my work is so centered around understanding nature so that I can better understand myself and I can make better decisions about how to be in collaboration and communication with the natural world, which I feel like I was very distant from, and I still feel very distant from, and how I can become closer to speaking nature. So when we decided to go forward with the fellowship and maybe collect a larger round or an older tree, because we were interested in really diving deep into what we could learn about redwood trees through dendrochronology. And logging obviously was such a detrimental action that humans did do to our forests out of desire and need. And so we started thinking about, well, could we collect from obviously already down trees? Can we find a much larger stump that we might be able to collect from? And so at Camp Jones Gulch, this is right there in the entrance across their main cabin. Just across the way from that, there was this perfect, huge, beautiful, maybe like 7 foot in diameter. Well, it's not a perfect circle, so like one length was about 7 feet, the others were about 5 to 6. But there was this really big, beautiful burn scar, and it was big enough, and there was enough wood there that didn't seem like it had completely rotted for us to be able to cut some cookies off the top of. And here it's really interesting. You can see right here are some scars from said logging, and this is the way they would have done it in the past. They would stick these wedges into the log to stand on so that they could then fell the tree. And so here, I want to say thank you to Bruce Baker, who was our chainsaw master. With that one chainsaw, he was able to cut several pieces off of this stump. So one thing that I want you guys to take notice of, and for those who have followed along this story closely over the last year already know what I'm going to share, but still in the ground, unlike the down trees that we collected the rounds from earlier. So the root system is still in the ground. Little did I know what that actually meant. So after Allison came by the studio, I prepared one of the rounds to polish, smooth surface so that she could come in and do her work on this redwood tree. She read a piece of information that sort of pierced my heart in like a very, very dramatic way. And what she told me was that this stump was was indeed really special. And not only because it had survived 3 different fire events over the course of its life, but that when we had collected the stump, and here's the part that was really painful, that the stump itself was still alive. And we know that the specimen, the tree, was still alive because of all of these the fairy ring that was growing around the stump. So clearly, after this tree had been cut down, it was still alive and sent up new shoots and new trunks. But the stump was still alive, which meant that what she told me when she did her analysis is that she was able to find the line, the ring that represented when it was cut down. And then since that cut mark, there was almost 100 continued growth. And so the stump was adding mass to itself. And that desire to survive was still present. And things were happening in that tree where the tree was still growing and continuing to support. So that was a really kind of devastating moment for me, to understand that, it sort of felt like we had kind of amputated, re-amputated a limb that had already been cut and healed. But I think that there was an important lesson for me, in what, as an artist and as a science communicator, I wanted to share in this work. And I think that is about our relationship and our role in the natural world, and how absolutely important it is, to think about that, and that uh, we don't exist outside of the systems and the communication and the relationships that are already being set forward with the natural world. And our actions and our impacts absolutely drive the direction of how an ecosystem is depending on what we do. And so I'm just going to come back to this picture again of Big Basin regenerating itself. Just to share that we didn't know how the forest was going to withstand a fire like that. And I don't know if anybody really understood, or could have predicted that so many of the trees so far would even survive this. I mean, and there's a long way to go to understand the impact of a fire like that. But I think that was it. It was like, here's an opportunity where we're still learning. We are still needing to be in conversation with nature. We have to still continue to stay diligent um, in exploring and asking questions, and being humble to say that we don't know everything. In fact, that I think the more we sort of have the opportunity and the generations of collective knowledge that had led us to this point, we have still so much to learn, and that our role today is to leave more information and inspire new questions that will then pull the generations forward after us to continue to to have a deep relationship with our natural world, our earth. So this piece is the first piece that I created as a result of the Forest Fellowship, and it's called Since 1931. And that is the approximate date that Allison Carroll, the dendrochronologist, gave me for when our tree was cut down. And I say since 1931 because we don't really know what happened, what the tree went through before that. And all we have are the remnants of the tree rings, and seeing how the rain fall and the dry years and the wet years impacted the growth, how the fire impacted this tree. And I think what it is for me since 1931 is what we learned after that, and how we're using that information to steward Camp Jones Gulch now. And so this piece is really about all of the different ways that data has been collected thus far. And so in the background, I read their the stewardship and management report for Camp Jones Gulch, and what makes that area so special. And I'm definitely not a scientist, so obviously I'm generalizing here and just sort of pulling what I took from that report to put into this piece. But what I was really moved by, especially of that area, that protected area, was all of the different types of ecosystems that make Camp Jones Gulch, not just the redwoods, but the grasslands, the riparian, the creeks, and the native species, the non-native species, how all of that is coming together and helping us make decisions of how we can move forward today. And so all of those silhouettes in the back, and there are non-natives included in there, I wanted to just weave a tapestry of everything we know so far. And that's not even, that's not to say that we know anything conclusively. It's just all the things that we've collected and all the data that we have collected thus far is represented in that backdrop. And then pasted on top of that is a print of our redwood round that we collected. And then because I was so devastated by what we had done, I did want to incorporate a human element into this work in a way that was really reflective. And so this the canopy that is depicted in this redwood tree is actually me. So so here I am posing in different kind of forms of offering, but of chaos, because what I really wanted to demonstrate was the way that humans can kind of have these two sides of being in conversation with nature and working against nature. And that is something that we always have a choice on. And that's, I think, one of the roles of these works is to offer a dialogue and be in conversation with you about how we can see those roles out. And so I met with a really beautiful story of the California condor, which of course is a bird that relies on burn cavities and redwoods as well. But more than that, we're sort of facing off, and that offering is to the condor is as a demonstration of one of the more successful stories that we have had of humans choosing to make decisions based on wanting to keep condors in our lives, and because of that, we still have them here on our coast, which is so I'm so grateful for all of those who did that work. But there are things that we can now do today, and so the birds that are reflected on that limb are really about that. And so the marbled murrelet, I'll show some details. I guess they're not in the order of which I was going to share. But the marbled murrelet, of course, is a seabird that's makes their nests in trees, and not just redwood trees, but high up in canopies. And that was only discovered like pretty recently in sort of the I think it was the 60s or the 70s, and we didn't really quite know where marbled murrelets were nesting. And I'm really grateful to Portia Halpert and Alex Rinkert for talking to me about marbled murrelets, and I really recommend you all tune back into Portia's webinar as well about marbled murrelets. I learned a lot from that particular webinar. But what's really special down here in our neck of the woods is that we have a very local population of murrelets, so that breed here specifically, and don't go up north to the more northerly ranges where the other populations of murrelets are. And one of the main sort of threats right now, which I learned from this research are Steller's jays and corvids and and crows in general, and ravens and crows, and that's again, once again, our doing. You know, when we are out hiking, these particular types of birds follow, and they do have a shared relationship to us, and so we can absolutely do things and our actions to minimize or help reduce the number of jays, in Steller's jays in the area, to especially in areas where we know that there are nesting sites for marbled murrelets. Again, and I wanted to really be careful about not villainizing Steller's jays. That's not at all what this is about, and nor am I even trying to villainize people. You know, we all have our specific needs, and we all have our desires that drive what we do. But I think when we understand how those particular actions can have an impact, that's when I sort of am imploring us to make decisions that are going to be in conversation and supportive of everybody else that is relying on these lands as well. I wanted to point out that these ravens that are depicted here in this piece are actually from Santa Cruz proper. I had a real pleasure of watching these particular ravens dumpster dive at the UC Santa Cruz campus, and I was at the library. This was years ago, but I was happy to bring these back into a painting. And then also I wanted to just put some attention onto the lichens that are here. And I wanted to give a special thanks to Rike Naisborg, who also did a lichens webinar through Sempervirens Funds under the Redwoods webinar series. And she, as far as I know, is the only one to survey the Big Basin area for lichen diversity up in the redwood trees. So all of these species that are here included in the canopy are a result of the direct work that she did. And I did want to point out that our trees are different than the ones up north in the northern range. What she had mentioned was that the lichen diversity is much higher down here because we have a drier climate, and the moss diversity is much higher up north. So I thought that was really cool, and I really wanted to show how much diversity of lichens are living in the canopy that we don't ever get to see. So in conclusion, I'm really honored to have these works be included in the current Treasured Trees exhibit at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History, which you can see until the end of November. And I really hope that you'll be able to take a look at this. And there are many of the illustrations that you see in that exhibit are also pulled from the Redwoods and Climate series that I did for Sempervirens Fund. So I'm very much looking forward. I have 2 more works that I will be producing as a result of the Forest Fellowship. We collected 3 rounds from Camp Jones Gulch, and so there will be 3 works total. I'll give a little bit of a hint as to what I'm going to be focusing on next, but it is going to be on fire. And if you notice in this picture, those frames, those are all reclaimed, salvaged old growth redwood frames that I was really happy to work with a local woodworker. His name is Scott Willis in Davenport. Of course, again, thank you to David Cowman, who introduced me to a bunch of his friends, who introduced me to Scott to make these redwood frames. But he's actually made me another full panel made out of salvaged old growth redwood, the same size as since 1931, 78 inches by 78 inches. And I will be using a burning tool to create burned images into the old growth redwood tree. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, I'm really looking forward to answering some of your questions. And thank you once again so much for hosting me here on Under the Redwoods. And thank you for tuning.
Thank you, Jane. The first work is amazing, and I encourage people to check out not only your paintings, but the exhibit at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History. Sempervirens sponsored that exhibition, and it's a great way for people to get introduced both to your art and to learn more about redwoods, and check out that local community museum. So I think maybe we'll stop screen sharing.
Okay.
And I have a question for you. I'm always amazed when I see your work. And even before you did the Forest Fellowship with us, I feel like your reputation in large part is one of great specificity and accuracy in presentation of the natural systems that you present in your artwork. So that's probably not new post fellowship, although clearly there were some things you alluded to that you learned about redwoods. I learned a few things just listening to you today. But I'm curious more fundamentally whether the Forest Fellowship experience you think is going to change your art practice at all, and the way you may approach representing other species or other ecosystems, or do you see it as really just focused on this moment in time with redwoods, and it's not going to dramatically shape how you approach art going forward?
That's a great question, Sarah. Thank you. I really appreciate that you mentioning the accuracy or just the attention to the specimens detail, because as a scientific illustrator, that's important to me, but actually as an artist, that's really important to me too, because one of the things that I'm really deeply trying to communicate is that we don't need to imagine things, because the most amazing things and imaginative things already exist in nature. And so I think that I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the subjects by like stylizing them or taking them out of the reality of what they are, because what they are is just absolutely more mind-blowing than anything that like a human could like imagine or come up with. So that is a really important part of my practice always. I think that the Forest Fellowship was so unique because I had the opportunity to directly engage with scientists and land managers and go on field trips. And if anything, I'm just hungry to bring more of that into my practice, which I don't always get to do. So there is such a difference when I get to actually be in conversation with others who know more about this and have dedicated their life's work to these topics. And that was a real treat.
Yeah, and you're making me think. It occurs to me, we've talked to you about your experience of it, but undoubtedly, because I know how you've impacted me, our staff and some of the scientists and land managers that you've been talking to and inquiring with, they're now looking at your art, and I suspect that's changing the way they think about things, right? It's a two-way.
I sure hope that.
Dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I look at your art, one of the things is it just draws my eye to a level of detail that I don't, and I'm a huge appreciator of nature. I'm not somebody who has to be persuaded. I'm already part of your, natural audience, but there's always additional detail that I don't always spend a lot of time on. So for example, the many species of lichen that you interspersed into that piece, pretty amazing. And although I love all things great and small, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking day to day about lichen, although I did after that webinar. But it's just to say that
I spend a lot of time in the canopies of redwood trees.
Right. And so I think one of the things your art does is it illuminates it, especially when it's at a large scale like that. So I do think it's really impactful. So anyway, I just was curious how you thought it might change your practice going forward. I'm also curious, you've been a huge advocate for public art, the link between art and education, public education. I made the case at the outset that art, I think, is a tool for advocacy. But I'm curious, how have you seen people reacting to your art? Maybe any examples of people reacting specifically to Redwood art? And how do you think it helps them, aside from whatever beauty they may be inspired by, how do you think it helps them either connect more deeply with these forests or better understand them? Have you seen that kind of education and connection happening?
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. That's a really beautiful question. And I have a couple of answers for that. One, you actually even said it yourself, which for me is, I think, one of the most meaningful reactions that people tell me they have after seeing one of my paintings and then going back out into nature. They'll often say to me, the detail that you put in that piece, like I went out there and then I saw it and then I noticed that detail. And so that is something I really truly do hope people will take away, is because this is true for me too. And I think for me, like working with scientists is like an eye-opening experience for me, literally, when they show me, like when Allison shows me the redwood rings and what to look for. And all of a sudden, my eyes are opened. And so I think that for my work, what I'm hoping is that people are going back out into nature with eyes more open to seeing these sort of details and feeling like, oh, I feel more connected to this plant or this animal as a
Yeah,
result. I think that that is something that is really important to me. And the other thing that I really, and that's just, I feel like I'm kind of always in balancing the art side of me and the scientific illustrator side of me, because I do think that they do two different things. The art side of me is tapping in a bit more to the emotional and the interpretive side of things. And so I also hope that my work will um, leave food for thought for people in how they think about their own connections, or creating a way to have analogies or symbology around their the way that they see the world too. So I think it's twofold, and that is a little bit harder to maybe direct sort of results of, but those are the two sort of ways that I do really hope that the work will help, or just do a thing for people.
yeah. I've been thinking early in my career, and historically, conservation has been a nonpartisan issue. It's been, either you get it or you don't. Certainly, it's always been subject to public policy debates. But in
Mm-hmm.
more recent decades, it's become very partisan, very ugly. And I think a lot of conservation questions can't even be discussed rationally because politics have gotten so oppositional.
Mm-hmm.
And so it strikes me, and I think about this in the context of the materials we put out, that pure science is being questioned. Who knows which science to believe? That this may be a moment in time where the science illustration is going to be harder to be, it's going to be harder for more people to access it than
Yeah.
the pure art version. And when I look at a piece like what you just walked us through and that's at the museum, anybody can see that. I mean, inherently, there's some underlying statements about, boy, these are magnificent. And it's a very gentle sell on, hey, these should be protected. But I'm wondering if in this day and age, this kind of art is even more important than ever, because it's a way that people from all backgrounds, all ilk, whatever their politics, can simply appreciate the art, the artistry, the beauty. And maybe that helps us reach people quietly with conservation messages that right now are hard to communicate in other ways. I don't know if you've thought about that, or it feels like this kind of art maybe helps transcend politics a bit.
That's I really, really love that particular thread, and a lot of what Inkwell does is public art. And we have a series, some of you may be familiar who are tuning in already, called The Migrating Mural, which is a series of murals painted along migration corridors of animals that they share with people. And believe it or not, almost all of the murals across the nation are in very red states and in very red towns. And that is because it's a shame that it has become a partisan issue, because I think fundamentally at the root of it, we all do want to have clean air, clean water, places to recreate, places to be inspired. We
We're
love
all
our
connected to
lands.
nature, whether we like it or not.
Totally. And so I do, Thayer and I often talk about, like, wow, it's so interesting how, it's like, because it's art, like we can break through that barrier. And here we are creating a public art mural about conservation in these red states. Right. And so that is the power of art and emotions and human connection.
Yeah.
And art is something that's fundamentally human too. We're all born learning colors, learning how to draw, learning, how to use our hands. And so I do think there's an inherent connection there that people don't know how to necessarily put words to.
Yeah. Well, we've taken up a lot of your time. Matt, I want to give you a chance to ask maybe one question, and then we'll have to maybe take some of them off the air, as they say, with Jane, because I noticed that we're getting tight on time. Matt, do you have anything from the audience you want to ask?
I do. Yeah, thanks. And Jane, thanks so much for everything in this presentation and helping people see through your eyes the Redwoods. One of the questions I wanted to ask here is what mediums and methods you use for the artwork. So maybe walk us through some of what we saw and what went into the final art pieces.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to share that. I didn't focus a ton on this particular presentation on techniques, so I apologize for that. But you definitely can tune in to episode 3 of or is it 2? Maybe it's 2. No, 3. Well, sorry. Tune into the curiosity stories, where you can actually see me pulling a giant print from the redwood trees. So it's mixed media on paper, pulled from the tree, that are then pasted to a wood panel. And then I use acrylic and latex paints to hand paint all the other details.
Matt, you want to ask one more?
Be happy to. Yeah. Wondering if you could say a little bit about how you capture the visual info, like of birds, for example, to replicate their authentic details.
Oh yeah, lots of field observation, as well as my own photos, as well as Google image searches, as well as videos, as well as being able to look at collections, like specimens and collections, and oh gosh, a lifetime of drawing and painting birds.
Well, and there's some amazing artists, Audubon and others who specialized in birds, who are probably a resource as well.
Absolutely. Birds and art are very much tied.
Yeah. Well, I wish that we had more time with you, Jane, but I do want to promise this audience that as Jane finishes the art that she's doing as part of her Forest Fellowship series, we will share that with this audience. And let people know if there are places where they can see it in person, or if not, we'll share it online. Do check out the videos, because I think they're really fun and interesting, and get more of your artistic lens on redwood forests. And for those of you in the audience who are followers of this series, just to let you know that next month we will be doing Under the Redwoods webinar with Lisa Landers, another artist, but in the realm of film. She is the director of Giants Rising, which is a full-length movie that we have done several events showing, and I believe she's going to tell us that it's going to eventually be streaming, so we'll let you know if you can see it there. But it's a really wonderful look at yet a different lens on redwoods. So please join us next month under the Redwoods for time with Lisa Landers. And Jane, thank you as always. You always open my eyes to new perspectives on these forests, and for what's been a really amazing collaboration over the course of the fellowship. For our audience, this was a bit of an experiment for Sempervirens, and we have learned a lot. It's been a really gratifying experience for us, and I hope for Jane as well. So
absolutely, thank you.
yeah, thank you. And again, thanks to Sharp Investments for hosting us under the Redwoods. We'll see you next month. Thanks.